The wind cut through the snow like 1,000 tiny knives, and the forest groaned under the weight of ice-laden pines. Elara clutched the tiny bundle in her arms, feeling its warmth against the bone-chilling cold, and tried to ignore the growing panic in her chest. The mountain path had become treacherous after the storm, the trail buried under feet of snow, and the sky, once a serene pale blue, had turned into a bleak gray that promised more snowfall. She glanced back, her eyes searching desperately for any sign of help, but all that met her gaze were the endless, menacing shadows of the forest. Every step forward was a struggle, each breath visible as mist in the frigid air, but she forced herself to move. Her children slept tightly, wrapped against her chest and in a small bundle on the makeshift sled she dragged behind her. Sleep or not, they were vulnerable. They were counting on her. The forest was quiet now except for the soft crunch of her boots against the snow, but the silence was eerie, like the world itself was holding its breath. She knew they could not survive another night out here without help. The cold would seep into their bones, unrelenting and merciless. Every instinct in her screamed to turn back, to find shelter, but she had nowhere to go. Their cabin, which had always been a safe haven at the base of the mountains, had been destroyed in a landslide the week before. With no home, no supplies, and the children's small bodies trembling under layers of wool, the forest had become a prison. She paused, leaning against a tree, heart pounding, trying to catch her breath. Tears froze on her lashes, the wind stealing them as quickly as they fell. "Please," she whispered into the emptiness, "someone, anyone, help us." Then in the distance, she saw it, a silhouette emerging from the haze of snow and fog. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow stretching unnaturally across the landscape. But as it moved closer, her heart caught in her throat. The figure was enormous, a giant of a man, taller than any human she had ever seen, muscles rippling beneath a thick coat of fur, hair long and wild, and eyes as deep and dark as the mountain itself. He moved with deliberate calm, each step sure-footed despite the treacherous snow, and yet there was something gentle in his stride. Her first instinct was to scream, to flee, but the children stirred in her arms, and the warmth of their presence anchored her to reality. "Please don't leave us here," she begged, voice trembling. Panic and desperation etched into every word. The giant paused, turning his gaze toward her, and for a moment, she thought she might see judgment or even threat, but instead he knelt slowly, so that his face was level with hers, and spoke in a voice that rumbled like distant thunder. "I won't leave my family." Elara blinked, confused, then realized that when he said family, he meant her and the children. Somehow in this frozen wilderness, he had understood that they were all bound together, that she had fought to protect these small lives as fiercely as any parent could. Relief and fear clashed in her chest as she studied him, trying to find a way to trust him, to believe in the warmth that seemed to radiate from him despite the icy winds. He extended a massive hand toward her, palm open and steady, inviting but not commanding. She hesitated, then, with a shaky breath, placed her small, trembling hand in his, feeling the heat of his skin against the cold bite of the air. He lifted the children first, one by one, cradling them effortlessly as if they weighed nothing at all. Elara followed, feeling a strange mix of awe and gratitude as he guided them through the forest with ease, every step precise, every movement careful to avoid hidden dangers beneath the snow. He moved with a purpose but without haste, like a mountain itself had come alive to protect them. "Stay close," he said, voice low but steady, "and don't look back." "I know the way." The hours passed like minutes as they moved deeper into the mountains. The storm had worsened, snow now falling thick and heavy. But the giant's presence was like a shield. She could feel it, could sense the power and calm that surrounded him. Whenever she stumbled, he caught her without a word, adjusting his pace so that she would not strain herself. She found herself marveling at him, not just at his immense strength, but at the gentleness in the way he cared for her children, at the quiet patience with which he endured the storm's wrath. Her fear did not vanish, but it became mingled with trust, an understanding that somehow they were not alone. By nightfall, they reached a natural alcove in the mountains, a hollow formed by a cluster of rocks and trees that shielded them from the worst of the wind. The giant set down the children carefully, wrapping them in extra furs he produced seemingly from nowhere. Elara huddled beside them, heart still racing, watching him as he stood vigil, eyes scanning the surrounding forest. He made no move to leave, no suggestion that they were a burden. He simply stood there, a silent guardian against the merciless winter. In that moment, Elara understood something profound. Courage and strength were not defined by size alone, but by the willingness to protect, to endure for the sake of others. And though she had been ready to surrender to despair, this giant, this mountain man, had rekindled a spark of hope she thought had been buried forever. That night, as she drifted into a fitful sleep, she whispered a prayer of gratitude, the words almost lost in the wind. Thank you. Thank you for not leaving us. The snow fell relentlessly, blanketing the world in white. But inside the alcove there was warmth, there was safety, there was hope. And for the first time in days, Elara allowed herself to imagine a future beyond survival. One where they might thrive again, guided by the silent strength of the mountain man who had become their protector. Morning came slowly, the pale light barely piercing the dense storm clouds above. Elara awoke to the sound of soft snoring. The children still nestled in the furs the giant had provided. For a moment she forgot the horrors of the night, the terror of being stranded, the thought of losing them to the merciless mountain cold. But when she glanced toward the figure who had become their savior, she felt both awe and a sense of unspoken questions. Who was he? How could a man live in such isolation, yet care so deeply for strangers? And most importantly, why had fate brought them together in this frozen wilderness? The giant stirred, stretching his immense limbs, every movement fluid despite his size. He offered her a nod, a simple gesture that seemed to speak volumes. We must keep moving, he said. Voice calm but commanding. The storm will pass, but not until it has tested us fully. Elara watched him, marveling at the resilience he embodied. With his help they gathered firewood, and he guided her to a nearby stream, showing her how to chip ice and gather water without risking frostbite. There was no condescension in his teaching, only patience and quiet encouragement. Hours melted into days as they navigated the harsh terrain. Each night the giant ensured the children were warm, that Elara had something to eat, that the small comforts of life survived despite the unforgiving cold. Slowly a bond grew between them, not just of survival but of trust and understanding. Elara learned to read his subtle gestures, the way he shifted, his weight when danger was near, the way he scanned the horizon for threats, and in turn he seemed to understand her every fear, every hope without a single word. One evening, as the sky blushed with the fading light of sunset, Elara dared to ask the question that had haunted her. Why are you helping us? You could leave, return to your solitude. No one would blame you. The giant looked at her, his eyes reflecting the fading sun and the depths of the mountains. Because a family is not only born from blood, he said softly. It is born from loyalty, from love, from the choice to protect one another. You are my family now, and I will not abandon you. The words struck her with a force greater than any storm. Tears pricked her eyes, both from relief and the overwhelming gratitude she felt for this man who had risked everything to save them. She realized then that courage was not simply facing danger alone, but choosing to face it for others, to endure suffering for the sake of those you love. And in this frozen wilderness, that lesson had been carved into her heart by the giant who refused to leave. By the third night, the storm had finally relented, revealing the breathtaking majesty of the mountain peaks bathed in silver light. Elara and the children stood atop a ridge, the wind still biting but no longer deadly. The giant stood beside them, a sentinel of flesh and stone, eyes scanning the horizon as though guarding not only their bodies but their very souls. And in that moment she knew that they would survive, not just because of his strength, but because of the bond forged in hardship, the unbreakable promise that family, real family, was never left behind. Remember this, the giant said, his voice carrying over the ridge, firm and resolute. No matter what storms you face, no matter how lost you feel, family is worth fighting for. Always. Elara hugged the children tightly, feeling their small hearts beating against hers, and then turned to the camera of her mind, imagining the people who would hear their story. If you ever feel lost, she whispered, if you feel the world has abandoned you, remember that courage, love, and family can be found in the most unexpected places. And if this story inspires you, if it reminds you to hold tight to the ones you love, then subscribe, because together we share strength, hope, and the will to survive. The sun rose fully now, casting golden light over the snow-draped peaks. The forest, once ominous and merciless, now shimmered with possibility. The mountain man led them onward, not as a stranger, but as the guardian of their new beginning. and Elara knew that as long as they were together, there was nothing they could not endure. And for anyone watching, she hoped they would carry that message forward. Bravery is born from love, and family is a choice that defies even the harshest of winters.